So let's continue where we actually had a pause during last time. The background and, which is even more important, influence of the current president of the United States, Donald Trump, who is a unique person, being elected twice, which happens a lot, but not in a row, had a 4 years in between and came back. And possible influence. For sure, he is a president who has been, how to put it in a politically correct way, questioning many traditional aspects of the rule of law, which for me is definitely a big question. Why this has been questioned? And second of all, the way, the methods, the tactics, especially when it comes to the relations. Is it necessary to sacrifice relations with allies while achieving goals? And it's very hard question, very hard to understand why.
I agree. I don't like traditions so much. So from that sense, I think he's changing things. I usually like people who change things, and I think he's doing it for good. But yes, the semantics, or the way how he acts, I don't know why. It has never bothered me. Like the way he behaves or the way he does in front, it kind of has never bothered me at all. For whatever reason, I kind of. I don't know why. I think the people I follow from US, I guess the Chacos, the Patrick Bet-Davids, the Joe Rogans, they kind of lean behind him, or they are kind of like for the change, and they seem to agree, and they seem to be smarter than me, more successful than me. So, and I don't think that I don't see that they have any like hidden agenda. So I'm kind of just following and seeing what's going to happen. And from Estonian perspective, I don't think we are still in the same geographical area. It's not going to change. We still have troops in here. We are still part of NATO. And from my perspective, his actions make us rethink how we behave, and especially Europe. So I see kind of positives in all of what he's doing.
For sure, I'm not saying that every action he has done has a negative impact. No. And I also agree that change is necessary, change is good. We all heard in our previous careers, and probably quite often we still hear that I've always done like this. Why do I need to rethink my actions? So if I understand why to change and what I'm changing, that's perfectly fine. In the current situation, sometimes I've been asking myself, wait a minute. So there are certain understandings, certain values which we don't want to change because they are values. For example, you are not questioning rule of law, that the separation of powers. The courts do what they do because none of us is perfect. So that's why we need balance. Someone has to check and balance me. And if a person starts to say, hey, the court can't say anything about me, wait a minute, so what was that? 250 years, almost 250 years of the US democracy, which actually made this country so successful with all the goods and bad aspects. And now you are actually saying that everyone who has been against me or who has done a job investigating certain things is kind of a public enemy, they need to go, which is unheardable. Even why US system was not prepared for this shock that I'm firing someone from the FBI or Department of Justice, why there is no like a mechanism which prevents it, because nobody ever expected that this unwritten value will be questioned, that it's not possible in the democracy. It's possible in North Korea, China, or whatever, but not here. And that's probably shocking for me as with a long law enforcement background and being a lawyer. So wait a minute, even if I understand the change, and I do like that some people are starting to ask, hey, wait a minute, why we are spending money there? Or is it effective? That's very good. But the way you are doing it, it's first of all against my understanding how to build relations. And second of all, it's against values. Now, there has been certain things which, in my understanding, not even only against the values, but also against the higher idea. For example, this question of relocating people from Gaza. I'm definitely supporting Israel's right to defend themselves against terrorism. There is no question about that. And Hamas is a terrorist organization. But in the 21st century, place even the question, even the idea that you just even throwing it out, hey, let's discuss to remove 2 million of people. It's like, now I start to understand why he placed back a portrait of a President Jackson from 19th century, who actually, by today's standard, committed the genocide act, removing Native Americans from the land on the East Coast and placing them in Oklahoma. Famous tragedy of Trail of Tears, where Cherokee people had to travel thousands of miles. Many of them died. We as a nation with the history of deportation understand this. And now, in 21st century, you being the leader of the most powerful nation, even throwing out this idea, that was definitely something which I cannot agree as a human being.
I don't know specifically what was the case.
The case was that because Gaza, after all these tragic events, after the terrorism attack by Hamas, is actually devastated for sure. Mm-hmm. And the proposal was, hey, let's take away, let's remove relocate people of Gaza to Jordan and Egypt, and America will take care of the Gaza and will create it, what he said, Riviera of the Middle East. Mm-hmm. I said, wait a minute, so based on which understanding of international law after the World War II it's even possible to think like this? That was definitely a shock for me and for the leaders of European nations.
So how realistic do you think that can even happen?
I do not think it's a very realistic, but what is problematic, and again, my understanding, that throwing these ideas on the table is giving a lot of possible tools of justification for dictatorships like North Korea or China or, of course, Russian Federation as well, because someone from the democratic world has questioned the basic values of modern world or basic values of the human dignity and international law, which never been even possible to think in the US history when we take, I don't know, Kennedy or Reagan or other people who has been leading US in a very difficult times.
So it's an interesting point in that sense that like, let's say if you go to war with Iraq or with Afghanistan, and I mean, you go to a war with Iraq for, weapons of mass destruction, and there's nothing. And you are making a mistake which is kind of justified just because, I don't know what's the justification there specifically. But now just reallocating in general and rebuilding and which is worse? Going there and fighting. So which is worse? Making a place capitalistic and taking care of those people by deporting them, because eventually that area has been historically all the time a danger zone. Like, in that sense, there is always war going on there. There is no way it's going to change. So what would be one of the strategies to make it so that it will not be a war zone? I mean, I don't think that even it will ever work, that even if you build the buildings there or if you do a city there, nothing changes. In reality, it's a impossible mission. It even sounds absurd to me, to be honest, that even if it's possible. But what's worse? Going to war for the wrong reasons and then staying there and fighting for 20 years and a lot of people getting killed, or being capitalistic minded and kind of just saying it out loud. And there hasn't been any actions either. So you're just playing the games what our enemies are playing without really. I don't think that they would ever do it. It's just like he's saying so many things that are just random, right?
Words has power, and I strongly...
I would say military has more power.
Sure, but the world and intent has smell and has a power. So justifying, even theoretically justifying the act of genocide, because relocating one social group based on nation, religion, or whatever, it's an act of genocide, which is an immortal crime. And it has happened with the Crimea Tatars during Stalin time, or Chechens, and many other people, and of course here to mass deportations. So even justifying it in theory is definitely worse, in my understanding, than going to the war on wrong reasons, which might be act of aggression legally. But for me, genocide, it's worse than aggression.
So genocide, I mean, maybe I don't know, I don't understand what's the wording. Genocide, the first thing, if what it reminds me is that somewhere in Africa, 100,000 people are getting genocide or killed every day. That to me seems like a genocide. If
it's based on the ethnical principle, like for example, Rwanda genocide, where Hutus and Tutsis killed each other and more than 800,000 died, that's definitely genocide against one specific group. So if I'm saying, hey, I will relocate those people from this land because they are specific ethnical groups, that's definitely act of genocide. And in this case, for example, if Russia will say, hey, we will never have peace here in East Ukraine, we will just take all Ukrainians and we remove them to the west part, and now it will be peace because no one else is fighting against us. So that's more or less happened in Estonia in 1949 when Forest Brothers movement was so strong, and Stalin said, wait a minute, we cannot get rid of them. Hey, let's move away farmers, because then freedom fighters, Forest Brothers cannot get food because farms are empty. Boom, 25,000 people were deported, and to be honest, most of the resistance movement actually disappeared after 49. So yes, a couple of people stayed, the last one 1978, but massive resistance came to its end. So it's definitely, it worked. Now, it's terrible tragedy, and for my values, it is not okay if someone from this part of the world or these organizations I do value throwing these ideas on the table. Now, how realistic it is, or what is a bigger idea behind it, here I would be rather cautious, because that's my assumption, what he wants to do or what he wants to say. And that's my emotions, which I will put together with assumptions, and I want to avoid that. I'm just saying that reading these words and justifying these acts, even in theory, that's a red line for me.
Maybe, again, what could be a strategy behind it?
I don't know.
It could be to make people emotional.
But then why?
I mean, there could be that you don't want them to look at the other direction or some other things. You are, I don't know. I have no idea, because it's a level of game. I have no idea what is played there. It's too high level. I mean, I can't even fathom what's the game, what kind of talks are there behind the doors between many different countries, many different Irans and everything around there. So there could be so many hidden stuff that it's really hard to understand anything. Most likely nobody understands anything.
What we are teaching or we are training in our sessions, that our message and our idea has to be simple. We have to believe in it, and we have to guarantee that people around us understands.
Unless it's a deception, right?
Unless it is a deception, but to decept who? To decept your own allies? That's.
I mean, usually from the Middle Eastern side, usually Western civilization is pretty predictable. How our values are, if we are working according to our values. If now you throw out things that are not going according to our values, it may make them start thinking differently and actually start solving their own problems at their own turf as well.
Again, I am not saying that I know the story behind it.
Me neither. Nobody knows.
And I don't like assumptions in this. But based on my values, which I value from our society as well, say, hey, wait a minute, that is something I would not like to hear, because so far I have heard it from the countries which are definitely not aligned with our values. And you mentioned Estonian perspective. Of course, I do agree that Mr. Trump has made a lot to awake Europe. There is no doubt that his words and actions and statements has been definitely good to raise security awareness and preparedness of European Union and European nations in the case of. That's no doubt. And I think that he has made it's very clear and been successful. I don't like semantics, I don't like rhetoric behind it, but to be honest, it worked. Like it or not, but it worked. Now, with certain things, if you have been successful in solving one situation with one method, it doesn't mean it applies. It's not like a one size fits all.
Yeah, but the reality is that the only way how you are able to get feedback is if you take action.
I totally agree. Totally agree.
Even if it's a wrong action, at least you see how people react.
And I remember from my military servicemen, some of them, our colleagues also had the jokes that NATO abbreviation stood for no action talks only, and we don't want such NATO. We want whereas action and words are in balance. So if you say something, we act. And of course, the person who I value very much from the words, Obama, definitely President Obama had a lot of very right positions. But to be honest, when he said in Syria, that's the red line. Using of chemical weapons would be a red line for the Syrian regime. And then Bashar al-Assad did it. And nothing followed. So if you are using words like that is a red line, and you are not ready to make a next step, it's quite good if you don't use those words. So that's definitely an opposite understanding, where rhetorics and semantics were fantastic, but the actions did not support this idea. Do I have to choose between two extremes? No, and that's become to the dichotomy. I don't know which solution is better. It again depends on situation. Sometimes you need very much to support people with words, with the statements, with the feelings, because we are emotional creatures. In some situations, your actions become much more important. Where is the balance? I don't know.
So yeah, it's interesting also, like sometimes, I don't know what's the saying, but there's a saying something like extreme times need extreme measures, no?
Something like this, hullud ajad vajavad hullu inimesi. Crazy times needs crazy people.
So like hard problems need hard decisions.
I agree.
And out of the box thinking.
That's for sure. That's for sure. The only question that hard decisions, they have also to be balanced in a way, how do I present them? Sometimes there is no other way than to do hard decision with a hard wording. And we both, of course, you have much more military experience than I do have, and you have much more stressful military experience. But we all have all have watched this famous Full Metal Jacket movie, and this famous story with a gunnery sergeant, the drill instructor. Based on your experience, understanding, and values, of course, and trainings, definitely this behavior, insulting people based on their appearance, previous preparation, etc., it's out of the values. But in which situation this approach actually could be useful, or let's say would be justified? Would you use the same rhetorics or method if you know that you have 5 weeks to prepare this Marine unit after 5 weeks, because at this time in this stage of Vietnam War, it was only 5 weeks to prepare them. That was a basic soldier training before they will be deployed to Vietnam to fight.
So I would say it's just about the semantics and how do you kind of twist the words, because I mean, is it okay for a policeman to kill a person? Yes, if they It's a last resource, like
exactly,
the escalation. Yes, but eventually that's what you have.
Okay,
like that's how it is.
never thought from this perspective. But okay.
I never did it either. But it seems so that that's why wars happen, because there's no other way.
Yes, and Clausewitz in 19th century said that the war is a continuous, it's a continuing politics with a different methods.
And the same thing with nukes. Like eventually, the only ones who have used it were Americans.
Yes.
And if thinking that sense, Americans have done things that nobody else has done.
I do agree.
Which is, there's just don't make them escalate so much that they will eventually, because they are the only ones who have pushed the button in history.
And twice.
And how do you comprehend that thing? Because they have but they have used the de-escalation button in a way where, okay, now it's done. So when do you actually think that that's a righteous thing to do? And that's the difficult part about all of this, right? And now, if you compare to dropping nuke somewhere versus, because war, it can escalate to the nukes. Now, capitalism, it can what's worse, nukes or deportation or genocide?
To be honest,
all of them are
in my values, genocide, because it kills values. Nukes can kill, unfortunately, huge amount of people, but they're not killing my soul. They're not killing my belief.
You can die for your values, kind of.
Yes,
it doesn't matter what it is. So the question
but coming back, but I still want to hear your professional view about this justification. Where sometimes is it based on your experience? Is this pressure, this semantics, this pushing down your personal, in this movie, even dignity, when and how it can be justified? This famous 2 minutes.
It can't.
It can't? No way?
No.
Even if you have...
It will only happen when the enemy touches your weakest spot and you make an emotional decision.
But how can I prepare my fighters, and you've been in a special operation forces, how can I prepare my fighters to be ready where I'm captured or I'm really in such a stressful situation? Is it possible to prepare at all? I don't know.
For extremes, you can't.
You can't?
I mean, can you, how do you prepare someone to send out the nuke? You can't. There is this protocol. And if everything is practiced through, trained through, that's the maximum what you can do. But you really can't. Do you really know if you are put in a situation to, I don't know, shoot the person who is attacking you with a knife? How do you know? No, only thing what you can do is do training. And if the training is good, then you will be effective. If training is bad, you will be ineffective.
But this particular drill instructor, in his understanding, what do you think? Did he made this why, the reason why he was behaving this clear to him, to himself, why he did choose this method?
I think...
Ego? No?
I think in that particular case, while he was an asshole, he created a hell which is nothing compared to the hell that the soldiers will face in Vietnam.
So it was not train as you fight situation in your understanding?
He prepared them to the maximum mental, he kind of prepared people for the worst. And if it's very likely that the people who will go crazy in those camps, they would go crazy and lose more people in war.
So this behavior in this situation, was it justified?
I mean, could be. I don't know. We only thing how we could realize that would be if we have a simulator machine and we could simulate that situation 100,000 times and then see what would be different results and outcomes. If it would be done differently, I would say there is a possibility to do, the modern training is nothing like that. Or it doesn't. It has parts of it, and there is stress factor which you want to do, but if you go overboard, you're just killing people. Eventually you don't have people to send to actually do the thing. Maybe the war is not so crazy as you're training, so you can definitely go overboard and you can kill your people before they even get to war, which is never a good thing. Now, was it that the occasion that some of the people shouldn't have been drafted at all? And what is that because most of the people get through this? Most of the people actually went to war. There's only a few individuals who broke. Now, what could be the mitigations? That you must have some sort of a observer that, hey, we have few people who are not capable of conducting AV in this training, so let's drop them off and send them to some other position, like during the training. So I guess what it lacked is really the assessment part, someone who's detached and actually seeing that, hey, these guys are not going to be making anyways, so why do we do it? Why do we continue breaking people of our society? Let's send them back to our society rather than send them to war where we already understand that they are not capable of going through even this training. So I think that if you are making people crazy in your training, it's obviously going overboard. There's no question about it. But there is many avenues. So what you could do? You could. I think that's what we have learned, that nothing like that happens anymore.
And that's why I'm trying to make some kind of a connection between our topic today and this method of training. Mm-hmm. So even if in his understanding he was actually doing good, preparing people within very short time, only 5 weeks, to make them be as ready as possible mentally in facing many different stressful situations. So in my understanding, it's kind of a similar that the American president right now is using shocking semantics, which in my understanding for some nations are not necessary because it's hurting feelings, not bringing anything good. So Canada has always been your closest ally for decades, for hundreds of years. And going and insulting, deliberately insulting, saying for the prime minister, calling him a governor, mm-hmm. like making a small hint that, hey, you're actually not a real state, you might be a 51st state of our country. So if your task is to make a closer cooperation in border protection, so this insulting, even if finally, by the way, brought thousands of Canada law enforcement on the border, we can say, hey, it worked. But the level of damage between trustful relations, it's even hard to calculate because you hurt feelings. And that's why I learned in my career that you can criticize the actions, you can criticize performance, you can even be harsh in criticizing it, but don't get personal. Don't get, hey, that you are incapable to do because you are so stupid or you are whatever, lazy, fat, whatever justification. Criticize actions. Demand something. You can be strong. You can be even quite direct, mm-hmm. but do not get personal. And
I agree with you. Obviously, the saying was desperate times and desperate measures, I guess. But it just depends on what is your assessment of how bad the situation at the moment is. How far in one extremity I don't know. Let's take an example of Canada randomly. How far are they from getting back to the balance? And if your assessment that they are so far off that within next years we are never going to be able to play the long game here, then you may try this only option what you have is to disrupt. And eventually your idea is to get behind the table and just have a normal conversation. Because they are so far away, like we don't have enough time to indirectly get them to behind the table. So we just say, hey, we sit down or this happens. And now at least we can sit down, mm-hmm. and we can actually have the conversation about the actual things what we need to do. But like he's getting people behind the table. It's just a stupid method, I would say. But again, it's you don't if like how do you what's the word? How do you negotiate with terrorists? You can't, because they are so far off on the extremes that you can't kind of negotiate with them.
U.S. policy, as we both know, has been for very long periods. There is no talks with terrorists.
Which is from a logical perspective is a lose-lose situation. Like if there is no way of negotiating, there is no way. Like it's like you've given up, and you only think what you have is using power.
On the other hand, I was just coming from the military academy lectures, and we had a very interesting discussions about the laws. And it was a legal framework if the military has to use force during the peacetime together with the law enforcement, and what's the boundaries. And I actually use the same understanding, said, guys, it is easier for you if you use in your decision-making process the same OODA loop. Observe, orient, decide, and act. First of all, even if you are not a lawyer, hey, look on situation, okay, observe, what's happened? This happened. Excellent. Now, observe, okay, I have tools to use a physical force or weapon, or I can just shout, or I can build a wall, whatever. Mm-hmm. I can orient. That is my toolbox. But now I have to decide which tool I will get. And finally I have to act. Mm-hmm. So you can't orient if you don't know like the basics. And I think the same with the order loop is actually, if you don't have this understanding, if you don't have the basic knowledge, finally you have to trust your feelings and act based on what? On your values. Mm-hmm. Because if you have nothing else, if you don't know what to do, you've been never attending those lessons, you never heard about these legal restrictions, I will act according to my values because I believe that is right or that is wrong. In most situations, by the way, 90% of situations, people are making quite okay decisions. They probably will not putting all the paragraphs and articles behind the justification, but in a simple way, in a simple words, they actually justify the action. And in 90% they said that's correct. So the same, you have to act based on your values. And if you say, I'm not negotiating with terrorists, I have, yes, no other options, but at least to say, hey, that's according to my values. That's a negative result. Probably you say, hey, I'm stuck in the corner. I don't have a freedom of movement. But that's my values. Is it good or bad outcome? Mm-hmm. I don't know. But at least I had something. I agreed on some values.
So in that sense, what's interesting in terms of like strategy is that if our values are set, we are very predictable.
Are we? But we have a huge toolbox.
Yeah, we have a toolbox which they don't know. But then, you just have to be smarter. You have to dig deeper to figure out how we can actually do things according to our values. It's harder. Let's put it like that. It's harder. It's harder to I like the example where how many wars has Western world won since World War II?
Since World War II?
0.
So, wait a minute. What we had a bigger wars? Vietnam, Korea, Iraq, Afghanistan, Mali.
Yeah, Libya, I think the number is that there has been 40 conflicts where the US has been part of.
Yeah, okay.
And maybe some of them are under control, but what's the victory even looking like? Nobody even knows what's the victory looking like.
To be honest, you're actually right.
Nobody knows in any of those cases what's the victory looking like. Nobody's defined ever what's the victory, and that's if you don't have a definition of how the victory looks like, it's pretty hard to win. And then now, what was the example what our commander gave is that now look at the Russians. After the Second World War, how many wars have they won and lost? And the statistics were out of 40, they have won 37.
Again, what you say, what was a victory?
Well, for them, the victory is kind of you take everyone out, you kill everyone, you take the piece of land, you put your own government there, and that's how it's going to be.
They did not succeed in Afghanistan for 9 years.
Sure, but that was only 3 out of 40. Chechnya, yes, they lost the first time. Second time, they did it.
Okay, yes.
So I mean,
okay,
it's not so
Angola,
clearly.
Mozambique, all these interventions, but
in
I
general,
agree. In general, yes.
And the one of the differences there is that like we, as a Western side, we have values. We want to give heart to mind.
Yeah.
They just kill everyone.
Yeah, but I still want that we follow this heart and mind because we want to build relations.
I agree. But how do you win a war, or how do you deal? Because the world is so big, there is so many people. There is parts of the world which are still thinking like they are in the Middle Ages, That's why this human nature eventually they want to survive, and then when you're in survival mode, crazy people come like Hitler, and they take a lot of people, they brainwash them, and then eventually, if you have good methods. Because Germans, they had pretty effective methods in the beginning of the war, and they were successful.
Let's call them effective, not good.
Effective, yes. Mission command came from there. Pretty much all those things came from there. Now, observers around, I like this. I'm preparing for tomorrow's podcast, and it's about Brits. And I like this. Here is an amazing quote. What was written by this dude, and I have highlighted it, only 31 pages for tomorrow, no worries. But the quote is very awesome. And it's from Field Marshal Rommel. Once said that the British Army has the best manuals in the world. So thank God that they don't read them. Because what Rommel did, they just used British manuals.
You're kidding?
No.
Wow.
After the
this part of history, I didn't know that he used their manuals.
After the Third World War, as far as I don't know. Everything is just allegedly in my head because I haven't never checked the facts in 100% way. But I think in the dichotomy of the psychology of military incompetence book, there is something like that after the First World War, were tanks useful? Because they just entered in the late stages of the...
You mean First World War?
Yeah,
yes.
First World War.
Not very effective.
Yes, that was the kind of... what was it? That was the summary of seeing tanks. Now, were tanks effective or maneuverability effective in the beginning of the Second World War?
Of course, Blitzkrieg, yes, Hans Guderian tactics, etc.
So the results, the conclusions from the Western side while winning the war was that, hey, tanks are useless. But there were a British admiral, as far as I know, who was in the Navy, who said, we should now be making 3,000, 4,000 tanks in the meanwhile after the First World War. Why? Because that's the new thing. That's a new technology which we need to utilize. Now, obviously, he was fired or his ideas were burnt because of the egos. And eventually what Germans did, they kind of found the manual or the ideas what were presented to Brits that, hey, tanks are good. They have a lot of maneuverability. And they yeah, it makes sense. Let's do that. And that's what Germans did. So the people who have lost wars, they have been learning. I don't know what Western world has been learning lately, because we are kind of seemingly losing all the wars in the same manner all the time, because we haven't defined the victory. But and that's what also Chuck was saying. If you are willing to go to war, you should be going to war, and you shouldn't come home before the war is ended.
And he's right.
And it's not like a convention, let's go there half a year, let's start rotating people through, then it's something else. And you have to be decisive, and you have to define what's the victory. And I think that's something which hasn't been defined. And what's the victory looking like from our perspective at the moment? I don't know. Peace, obviously.
Yes, and the preserving of world order based on rules and values, because like our president Lennart Meri said, that international law is a nuclear weapon of a small nation. If we know that everyone is followed, then we can play the equal game. If the big countries are not following, or like in ancient Greek, they said that The big powers do what they want to do, and the small powers do what they have to do. And
now there's an interesting thing. What I thought now, following the rules, right? Now, were there in the American Civil War, like people were in lines, right? Standing at informations, and then shooting.
It was still
bum, 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 and shooting. Boo.
Okay.
On open field. Now, what did the enemy do? They just didn't go and stay in the line anymore. They were starting doing ambushes from the bushes. It was against the rules. But now
it was against the tactics, not agreed behavior, manners.
Sure, but it was like it was but that's kind of the same logic, in a way, where when you don't have enough resources. If you have more resources, yes, you can stand there in front of on an open field and fight man to man. But if you're smart, you go into the forest and you wait behind the rock.
And don't forget that the biggest game changer in modern military tactics has actually been a machine gun, because that's changed all.
That was the same thing.
Not tanks, not thing, but machine gun became, and you cannot march anymore like in Napoleon time. Mm-hmm. So that was definitely.
And guerrilla warfare.
Which he was also quite innovative dude in this sense. But coming back to values, we have in a theater right now a play, and that's a question of values. So a family in Central Europe is they did find in the house an old painting of Hitler from his previous very early stage. Of course, today that would be pretty expensive, even if he was not a great artist. Now, the lady of the house, she has a Jewish origin, so a part of her family died in Auschwitz, and her husband is a German citizen, saying, "Oh, okay, very bad dude, of course, but hey, we can sell it. It's actually a huge amount of money." And they start to argue: is it okay to sell it and actually to even make this art more popular, or just to destroy it? And family splits into two. Not only because it's actually gets a bigger discussion among the family, not only those two people. What is the value? And to be honest, I don't know what I would have done, because, okay, I do understand that he's a terrible person. It's a huge tragedy he created for modern world against all the values and human understandings of humanity. But now here is a piece of, I cannot call a masterpiece, but thing which for some people has certain value in financial field. And does this piece represents the ultimate evil he created, or it's just a piece of interesting history which might be sold? And I don't know. Is it a question of values? Is it a question of emotions? Is it a question of common sense? And I kept asking myself, I don't know what I would have been done.
So I have interesting perspective here, and I think it's all about perspective. What is your perspective, and how you are looking at the situation? Like, my first thought was like, just get over it and take the money, obviously. Yeah. The second thing was that what do you the question here is, how can you in your head make this situation, how can you reframe it, or reword it in your head so it would serve a different purpose? So what Hitler wanted to achieve with that painting?
Oh my God, what do you know? It was just after the World War I.
So, but I can say that most likely he didn't want us to make money out of it. So he rather wanted us dead, or he didn't want to support us. Now, what we are doing, and he can do nothing about it, we will make money from a thing he created that he never wanted us to make money of. And now we are doing it in your face, and he has nothing he can do about it.
But maybe he wanted his art to be so popular and so valued because he dreamed about himself like a future big artist, but unfortunately or fortunately couldn't join the Vienna School of Arts, and that's why he chose another way.
Most of the money we will donate to the Jews.
Okay,
and also he will be even more mad because he actually helped them. So it's just a matter of how do you change your perspective? How do you justify for yourself? And I would say there is always a way eventually to think it in a way where it's justified. There's always a way.
That's for sure. A couple of years ago, here in Estonian example, and again, we're coming back to the values, we have a famous writer, Juhan Smuul, who wrote very good books, and some of the movies we all in Estonia have looked in 70s, seen, Me oleme, Here We Are, comedies and stuff. It's actually based on his stories about the summer vacations on different islands. We all know the jokes, it's a part of our DNA and jokes. Now, in 1949, he as a young writer, a very dedicated communist, was a part of deportation team. We have a Juhan Smuul street in Tallinn. We still have his monument on the house he lived in the center, where he was working as a writer, and that was actually a house dedicated to writers. Many writers lived there. Now there is also explanation, like a poster posted, that hey, beside his achievements in literature, he's also been part of a genocide. So now what to do with his heritage? I don't know. He has a museum on island, Muhumaa, where all these funny stories began. To destroy his movies? I don't know. Is it stupid enough? Probably. But what to do? Who he is?
How is it going against free speech?
I don't know.
But it's very similar to me. Really, it sounds like yes, there were American presidents who have owned slaves, right?
Now we're touching this, yes.
So,
even the guys who actually signed all this founding, Franklin, George Washington had slaves. I've even visited his manor in Virginia, and also the graveyard where the slaves dead. Yes, I agree. He was a slave owner.
Everyone has been flawed. It seems so. Yeah, everyone, even some people who are considered like, hey, they made the great thing in some ways or forms. They were bad in some things. There are obviously good people as well who have lived perfect life. So you can crucify everyone on everything. So as far as me looking it back, what's the best thing to do? Just have to learn from it and move on, because you can't change shit. And the only thing what you can do is live your life better, because you will fuck it up anyways, in some way or form.
I totally agree that none of us is perfect. We all do, and we constantly continue to make mistakes. But making mistakes are not the same like repeating them, because when we are learning, so we are now thinking, okay, I hurt someone by saying this or that. Now I have to do something to change my behavior to avoid this situation. Or being an instructor or being a teacher at the military academy, when I do receive the feedback, hey, teacher, please next time, can you please be more, just today received it, hey, I really like the lessons, but I would love if you will be more systematic, like saying, hey, this first, then it's second. And I know it was a very good critics. Oh, I was jumping from one topic to another. It was interesting for me, but it was not systematic. It was hard to follow. Now, if I will still continue the same method next time, it means I'm not valuing my students. I might be making some other mistakes, but I try to do my best to avoid this and prepare myself better, to be more systematic, etc., etc. It's the same I had experience in combat ready. Some people like my approach, some people not. If I continue to do exactly the same for all teams, it means I'm not valuing combat ready, which is wrong. I have to value it.
So that's the thing. Like it depends on what is right, and the human tendency obviously is to also repeat mistakes. It's not a new thing.
Repeat?
Yeah. I mean, people repeat the same mistakes constantly because they lack perspective, or they are too tunnel vision. They were not able to detach because there were distractions. There were many things which you can't, because we are not robots. And you can do, you can try to not repeat, but you still may repeat it. That's always the option. Because you just can't, you're not able to detach enough. You're not able to see another perspective. You may be emotional. You may be like, we are human beings. That's the thing. And it's a normal tendency which happens. That's why we don't learn from history all the time, ever. I think maybe the problem could be that human life is just too short that it doesn't enable us to learn. Like it's just the lifespan of one human being is just too short.
But we as individuals, of course, we have a short time to live here. But at the same time, all of our previous generations are also producing. Estonian nation has been here for 5,000 years, approximately. So during this 5,000 years, we have accumulated a certain amount of knowledge and wisdom, which comes from our grandparents to us. We adopt it, we change it, but we learn from it. You said that we are not learning from history. I think one thing we have learned that how to build alliances, how not to repeat the mistake of 1939 where we said, oh, wait a minute. So we actually have not strong relations, we are alone. So that's why we are so desperately were trying to get into the European Union and NATO, because we understood we need alliances, we need building relations. So in this form, we can say we learned something. At the same time, innovating and adapting, again, we're repeating the same mistake. If we were innovating and adapting quite well 30, 25 years ago, not anymore.
I would say that if you now take the perspective of 5,000 years, we have definitely learned a lot. Because the way we lived 5,000 years ago compared to what we're doing, like life is a better world is a better place, world is a safer place. I think one of the things what we maybe do not want to accept is that we are more animals than humans.
Wow. What do you mean, Remo, about that?
I mean, how long we have been animals without any conscious thinking?
I know.
100 millions of years, right? So we have just barely started thinking.
And still using only a certain percentage of
Absolutely.
our brain.
And even if we are using the whole of it, it doesn't mean that it seems like we are still more animals than humans in that sense. So we tend to forget that animals still behave in some certain ways. We want to survive, and if it's about survival, everything goes out of the window. And it just depends on what level of survivor, I guess, you are maybe living on. I don't know, you have to learn some history, biology and everything to figure out what's the actual solution there or what's the actual state. But I mean, we are just animals in reality.
Yeah.
We just try not to be. And I think we have been doing a lot of progress in that sense. Otherwise, we wouldn't have this, what we have. Otherwise, we were still running in a forest somewhere. Mm-hmm. So we are on a right track in that sense of accelerating. And I think what has been the great equalizers or whatever is that when we will almost get extinct.
Really?
Then we start from square one again, and then we don't have so many bad people, and then we have another try, and eventually maybe things will go better.
So that's why we say in our training that it's a constant learning.
Yeah, learning it never ends. That's what the tomorrow's guest's father also said, who was a veteran in the Second World War. That the one thing he learned from his father is that training never ends, and we will never be ready. So, and as far as I think, I'll be more animal in the end of my day than not. That's why I'm saying that if human beings lived for, I don't know, 300 years, then we have a more possibility to maybe be human.
But Galapagos turtles, these huge turtles, they are still turtles. Even they live 300 years.
And they live in peace.
And they live in peace.
So yeah, that's how the life is. I mean, it's complicated as it seems so.
But yeah, keep on trying, keep on learning, and don't be selfish. So be open-minded. And I really say big thanks for this discussion. It opened many perspectives. Thank you very much.
All right. Talk to you next time.
See you. Thanks.